Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundations of Frost. Ryland Mercer always considered himself a reasonable man. Growing up in the harsh winters of northern Minnesota had instilled in him a quiet resilience that served him well through life's challenges. His father, a logging company foreman, had taught him the value of hard work and self-reliance, while his mother, a nurse at the local hospital, had shown him compassion and patience. After graduating with honors in mechanical engineering, Ryland founded NorthStar Solutions, a company specializing in cutting-edge HVAC systems designed specifically for extreme cold weather. His innovation, a revolutionary heating system that operated at a fraction of the energy cost, had made him a small fortune by his 35th birthday. He met Audrina Wheeler at a charity gala in Minneapolis. The daughter of real estate magnate Montgomery Wheeler, Audrina possessed a captivating beauty that immediately drew Ryland's attention. Her blonde hair cascaded over shoulders draped in designer fabrics, and her laugh seemed to light up the room. They danced together that night, and what began as a chance encounter soon blossomed into a whirlwind romance. Montgomery Wheeler had built his fortune through luxury property development across the Midwest, specializing in exclusive waterfront properties and high-end commercial complexes. The Wheelers were old money, influential, and very protective of their only daughter. From the beginning, they viewed Ryland as an outsider, a self-made man whose hands had known labor and whose accent still carried traces of his rural upbringing. "He's just not one of us," Audrina, Montgomery had told her repeatedly. "His company is successful, I'll grant him that, but he lacks the pedigree, the connections." Evelyn Wheeler, Audrina's mother, was even less subtle. "Darling, there are so many suitable men from families we've known for generations. Why settle for someone who grew up in some backwater town?" But Audrina had been adamant, or so it seemed. "I love him, Mother. He's brilliant, hardworking, and he treats me like a queen. What more could I want?" Their wedding was held at the Wheeler family estate, an elaborate affair that made the society pages across 3 states. Ryland had felt uncomfortable with the ostentation but wanted to make Audrina happy. His parents watched proudly as their son married into one of the most prominent families in the region, though they too sensed the undercurrent of condescension from the bride's side. For the first 2 years, their marriage seemed perfect. They purchased a stunning contemporary home nestled in a wooded area outside Minneapolis, combining Audrina's love of luxury with Ryland's appreciation for natural surroundings. He expanded his business, while she took a position managing her father's charitable foundation. They discussed children, planned vacations, and built what Ryland believed was a solid partnership. The first cracks appeared subtly. Audrina began spending more time with her childhood friends, particularly Thad Norwood, the son of a state senator and now a rising political star himself. Recently elected as the youngest state representative in Minnesota history, Thad projected ambition and charisma. Whenever he appeared at social functions, Audrina seemed to light up in a way Ryland hadn't seen in months. "He's just an old friend," Audrina would dismiss when Ryland mentioned her animated conversations with Thad. "We practically grew up together at the same country club. It's nothing." But Ryland noticed the lingering glances, the inside jokes, the way Audrina would check her phone and smile secretively. Business kept him busy, sometimes requiring travel to installation sites across the cold northern states. During one such trip to North Dakota, lasting 2 weeks, he called home every evening. But Audrina's responses grew increasingly brief and distracted. When he returned home a day early to surprise her, the house was empty, though her car was in the garage. A text message received hours later explained she was catching up with old friends and would be home late. That night, as she slipped into bed smelling of unfamiliar cologne, Ryland felt something cold settle in his chest, something that would eventually crystallize into the ice of betrayal. Chapter 2. Gathering Storm. The Wheeler family's annual winter retreat at their Lake Superior estate had always been a tense affair for Ryland. This year, however, the atmosphere was particularly frigid. The sprawling property, with its stone facade and towering windows overlooking the frozen lake, housed 3 generations of Wheelers and their favorite associates for a week-long celebration leading up to Christmas. Remember to mention our donation to Senator Norwood's education initiative. Evelyn Wheeler instructed her daughter as they prepared for dinner. Thad will be thrilled to hear his father's program has our support. Rylan pretended not to notice the significant glance exchanged between mother and daughter. Throughout the evening, he observed how the family positioned Audrina and Thad together at every opportunity: seating arrangements, activity pairings, even photo opportunities. Montgomery Wheeler clapped Thad firmly on the shoulder during cocktails. The youngest state representative in history, and mark my words, he'll be governor before he's 40, Montgomery boasted. We need men like you leading this state, son. The term of endearment wasn't lost on Rylan, who had never once been addressed as son by his father-in-law during 3 years of marriage. Later that evening, Rylan overheard a conversation between Audrina and her cousin Sydney while retrieving a jacket from the coat room. So how long has this thing with Thad been going on? Sydney asked with undisguised curiosity. Audrina's voice dropped to a whisper. It's complicated. We've always had a connection, you know that. But things have intensified these past few months. What about Rylan? A pause. Rylan was a mistake. My parents were right. He doesn't fit in our world, never has. You should see how people look at him at the club. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. Thad has his political career to consider. A messy divorce wouldn't look good for his image. Rylan slipped away, his mind racing. That night, he searched Audrina's phone while she showered and found hundreds of messages between her and Thad. Explicit, intimate exchanges that left no doubt about their relationship. The following days at the Wheeler estate became an exercise in self-control. Rylan maintained a calm demeanor while inwardly cataloging every slight, every whispered conversation, every touch between his wife and her lover. He noticed how the entire Wheeler clan seemed complicit in the deception, creating opportunities for the affair to flourish right under his nose. Montgomery pulled Rylan aside on the third day. I've been meaning to discuss something with you, he began with unusual cordiality. There's an investment opportunity in Colorado, a development project that needs someone with your technical background. It would mean relocating, of course. Rylan understood immediately. They wanted him gone, shifted away to some distant project while Audrina and Thad continued their relationship with convenient geographic separation. That's interesting, Rylan replied neutrally. I'll need to think about it. Of course, Montgomery nodded, patting Rylan's shoulder. No rush. Though these opportunities don't come along often. That evening, a severe snowstorm hit the region, dumping nearly 2 feet of snow within hours. The wind howled around the stone mansion, creating massive drifts against the walls and doors. Inside, the Wheeler family gathered in the main hall around a roaring fire, drinking mulled wine and reminiscing about family traditions from which Rylan felt distinctly excluded. Rylan excused himself to make an important business call, stepping onto the covered porch where reception was better. The door clicked shut behind him as he concluded his call. When he tried the handle to return inside, he found it locked. Through the frosted glass panels, he could see Audrina, Thad, and several members of the Wheeler family watching him. Rylan knocked, first gently, then with increasing force as the bitter cold began seeping through his light sweater. They made no move to help him. Open the door, he called, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Audrina stepped closer to the glass, her features visible through the frost patterns. She was laughing. Behind her, Thad wrapped an arm around her waist possessively. Montgomery Wheeler raised his wine glass in what appeared to be a mocking toast. Freeze to death, worthless idiot. Audrina's voice carried through the door, followed by uproarious laughter from the gathered family. Rylan stood there for a long moment, the temperature well below zero, the wind cutting through his clothes like knives. He saw his marriage for what it truly was, a cruel joke at his expense. Without another word, he turned and walked away from the house, trudging through knee-deep snow toward the service road where his truck was parked. Behind him, the laughter continued, none of them believing he would actually leave in such dangerous conditions. None of them knowing the man they had so grievously underestimated. Chapter 3. Cold Departure. The wind sliced through Rylan's clothes as he trudged through the snow toward the service road. His vehicle, a custom-modified F-350 equipped for extreme weather, waited beneath a layer of fresh powder. Years of growing up in northern Minnesota had taught him to always keep emergency supplies in his vehicle, a habit that would now save his life. Inside the truck's storage compartment, he found his heavy-duty winter coat, insulated gloves, and thermal boots, quickly changing into them as his fingers began to numb. The truck started immediately, its engine modified by Rylan himself to perform in sub-zero temperatures. As he pulled away from the Wheeler estate, he glanced in his rearview mirror. No one had come after him. No one had cared enough to ensure he hadn't frozen to death in one of the worst blizzards to hit the region in years. The realization crystallized something in Rylan's soul. The warmth he had carried for Audrina, the hope he had maintained for their marriage despite the mounting evidence. All of it froze solid and shattered within him, leaving behind a cold clarity that would drive his actions in the days to come. He drove carefully through the blizzard, navigation almost impossible with visibility reduced to mere feet ahead. He relied on his intimate knowledge of the area and his vehicle's capabilities, eventually reaching a small motel off the highway where he checked in for the night. The elderly owner took one look at his condition and offered him a hot meal along with the room. "Nasty night to be out driving," the man commented. "Must have been something important to risk your neck like that." "It was," Rylan replied. "I needed to see things clearly." That night, as the storm raged outside, Rylan made his first moves. He called Travis Donahue, his company's head of security and a former Army Ranger who had served with Rylan's cousin. Travis had expertise that extended well beyond conventional security measures, skills that had occasionally proven useful for Northstar Solutions' more sensitive corporate matters. "I need a complete surveillance package," Rylan instructed. "Audio, video, digital. Everything we discussed for that situation in Detroit, but for personal use." Travis knew better than to ask questions. "Timeline. Immediate. And Travis, I need absolute discretion on this." Next, Rylan contacted his attorney, Simone Patterson, requesting an urgent meeting the following day. Finally, he called his chief operations officer, informing her he would be taking 2 weeks of personal leave and authorizing her to make decisions in his absence. "Is everything all right, boss?" she asked, concerned. "It will be," Rylan assured her. "I just need to address some unexpected developments." He slept soundly that night, the decision made. The man who had walked into that snowstorm seeking to save his marriage was gone. The man who emerged had a singular focus that would sustain him through what was to come. The next morning, Rylan drove to his company headquarters in Minneapolis, avoiding the home he shared with Audrina. In his private office, he began gathering financial information, transferring funds into separate accounts that had been established as contingency measures when his business began to succeed. A cautious man by nature, Rylan had always maintained financial independence despite Audrina's attempts to combine their assets. 62 missed calls and 27 text messages from Audrina accumulated on his phone throughout the day. He read none of them, focusing instead on executing the initial stages of what was rapidly becoming a plan. His meeting with Simone Patterson was brief and to the point. "I need divorce papers drawn up immediately," he explained, sliding a USB drive across her desk. "This contains evidence of infidelity. I want our assets protected and separated as cleanly as possible." Simone, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s who had built her reputation on handling complex divorces with minimal publicity, nodded. "And if she contests?" "She won't," Rylan said with certainty. "Not after what I'm about to do." By evening, Travis arrived with the requested equipment, cutting-edge surveillance technology that would form the backbone of Rylan's strategy. They spent hours reviewing the devices and their capabilities. "This isn't just about divorce evidence, is it?" Travis finally asked. Rylan's expression remained impassive. "No, it's about justice." 3 days after walking away from the Wheeler estate, having not responded to a single communication from Audrina or her family, Rylan checked into a suite at the Four Seasons Minneapolis under a different name. From this command center, he would orchestrate a sequence of events that would demolish the comfortable worlds of those who had laughed as they told him to freeze to death. His phone buzzed with yet another message from Audrina, the first he chose to read. "Where are you? My father is furious. We need to talk immediately. Call me back, or I swear I'll." He deleted it without reading further, then turned his attention to the detailed dossiers Travis had compiled on Thad Norwood, Montgomery Wheeler, and several key members of their political and business circles. As he reviewed the information, a plan began to take shape, a plan that would use the Wheeler family's own connections, pride, and ambitions against them. Rylan opened his laptop and began writing a series of emails that would set his revenge in motion. In the quiet hotel room, with the winter sun setting early over the Minneapolis skyline, he smiled for the first time in days. The temperature outside continued to drop, but the cold inside Rylan Mercer had already reached absolute zero, where nothing moved, nothing forgave, and nothing would stop the calculated retribution to come. Chapter 4. Calculating Vengeance. The presidential suite at the Four Seasons became Rylan's war room. 3 laptops lined the desk, each dedicated to different aspects of his plan. Maps, documents, and surveillance photos covered one wall, connected by red string that traced relationships and vulnerabilities. Travis had outdone himself, providing information that went far beyond what standard background checks might reveal. Thad Norwood has ambitions beyond state representative, Rylan muttered, studying the political dossier. Campaign finance records show early groundwork for a congressional run next year. This provided the first leverage point. Rylan contacted Simone Patterson, who connected him with Leanne Kovac, an investigative journalist known for exposing political corruption. Without revealing his personal stake, Rylan supplied her with information about questionable donations to Thad's campaign. Nothing illegal, but ethically dubious enough to warrant scrutiny. These donation patterns suggest quid pro quo arrangements with several development projects approved under unusual circumstances, Rylan explained during their clandestine meeting at a small coffee shop away from the political center of Minneapolis. Leanne's eyes narrowed as she reviewed the documents. "What's your angle in this? Why bring it to me?" "Let's just say I believe in political transparency," Rylan replied with a thin smile. "There's more where this came from if you decide to pursue it." Next, Rylan focused on Montgomery Wheeler's business empire. Through his own company connections, he uncovered that Wheeler Developments was over-leveraged, having expanded too rapidly in the last year based on promises of political support for rezoning applications, support that Thad Norwood had quietly helped arrange. Rylan reached out to several key investors in Wheeler's most recent project, an exclusive lakeside development that required specific environmental exemptions. "I thought you should know that the environmental impact study for the Wheeler Point development has some concerning discrepancies," he informed them anonymously. "The protected wetlands assessment appears to have been altered after initial submission." Seeds of doubt planted, Rylan turned his attention to the most personal aspect of his plan. Travis had successfully installed surveillance equipment in both Audrina and Rylan's shared home and in the apartment Thad maintained for constituent meetings, a space that had clearly become the primary location for his trysts with Audrina. For 3 days, Rylan watched and listened. He observed their intimate moments without emotion, noting instead the information they inadvertently revealed: Thad's political vulnerabilities, Audrina's access to her father's business accounts, plans they were making for when Rylan was out of the picture. "He'll agree to the Colorado project eventually," Audrina told Thad during one recorded conversation. "My father is increasing the financial incentives. Once he's relocated, we'll have at least a year to figure out the divorce strategy that does minimal damage to your political image." Thad kissed her. "Your father has been instrumental in positioning me for the congressional race. We can't afford any scandals now. Don't worry about Rylan." Audrina laughed dismissively. "He's always been desperate to be accepted by my family. He'll do whatever my father suggests just to stay in his good graces." The contempt in her voice solidified Rylan's resolve. He was not just dealing with infidelity. He was confronting calculated manipulation designed to remove him while preserving their reputations and ambitions. On the 7th day of his disappearance, as panic began setting in among the Wheelers and Thad, Rylan made his first direct move. He sent identical packages to Audrina, Thad, Montgomery Wheeler, and Thad's campaign manager. Each contained a single USB drive and a note that read simply, "I know everything. This is just a preview." The drives contained brief audio excerpts from conversations between Audrina and Thad discussing how to manipulate Rylan, along with snippets of their intimate encounters. Nothing explicitly damaging to Thad's political career, but enough to demonstrate that Rylan possessed extensive recordings. The reaction was immediate and panicked. Rylan watched through the surveillance feeds as Audrina frantically called Thad, who rushed to her house despite the risk of being seen. "How did he get these recordings?" Thad demanded, his political composure crumbling. "Where is he? What else does he have? Audrina paced the living room, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors. I don't know. He hasn't answered any of my calls since that night at the lake house. My father is beside himself. He says the Caldwell Group is suddenly hesitant about investing in Wheeler Point after receiving some concerning information about environmental compliance. Thad ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair. This could ruin everything we've worked for. My congressional announcement is in 3 weeks. Ryland smiled coldly as he watched their panic unfold. The initial phase of his plan was proceeding exactly as he had anticipated. The next steps would escalate the pressure exponentially. He picked up his phone and made a call to Malcolm Broderick, an old college friend who now ran a specialized security consulting firm for ultra-wealthy clients concerned about digital privacy. Malcolm owed Ryland a significant favor after Northstar Solutions had provided free heating systems for a shelter Malcolm's sister operated. I need full access to email and messaging accounts, Ryland explained. And I need it untraceable. That's crossing into some gray areas, Malcolm warned. What's this about? Let's just say someone tried to leave me for dead in a snowstorm and is about to learn why that was the worst mistake of their life. Malcolm paused. Give me 48 hours. With Malcolm's help, Ryland would soon have access to the private communications of the entire Wheeler family and Thad's campaign team. The information he gathered would form the foundation for the next phase of his revenge, a phase designed to not just threaten their reputations and plans, but to systematically dismantle them. Chapter 5. Fractured Alliance. Ryland's approach to revenge reached a new level when Malcolm delivered on his promise, providing access to the private communications of the Wheeler family and Thad's inner circle. What Ryland discovered exceeded his expectations, revealing a web of manipulation much more extensive than he had initially suspected. Montgomery Wheeler had been funneling campaign contributions to Thad through a complex network of shell companies, bypassing campaign finance regulations. In exchange, Thad had used his political influence to fast-track approvals for Wheeler development projects, including the environmentally sensitive Wheeler Point development. Most damning of all, emails between Montgomery and Senator Norwood, Thad's father, outlined a strategy to pressure Ryland into the Colorado project specifically to separate him from Audrina while maintaining access to Northstar Solutions' proprietary technology. They wanted to push me out while keeping control of my company's innovations, Ryland murmured, scrolling through the emails. Audrina was supposed to retain her ownership stake in Northstar through the divorce while I was shipped off to Colorado. The revelation transformed Ryland's anger into cold determination. This wasn't just personal betrayal. It was a calculated business maneuver designed to strip him of his life's work while maintaining the Wheeler family's access to his technological innovations. With this new information, Ryland expanded his plan. He contacted Devin Aronowitz, a competing developer known for aggressive business tactics against Wheeler developments. I have information suggesting the environmental impact study for Wheeler Point was falsified, Ryland told him during their meeting at Devin's office. I believe certain protected species were deliberately omitted from the assessment. Devin leaned forward, interested. And why bring this to me instead of the Environmental Protection Agency? Because you have the resources to act on it immediately, and I know you've been trying to acquire that parcel for years. Ryland slid a folder across the desk. All I ask is that when this comes to light, you keep my name out of it. Devin skimmed the documents, his eyes widening. This is explosive. Wheeler will be tied up in litigation for years if this proves accurate. It is accurate, Ryland assured him. And there's more where that came from if you're interested in other Wheeler properties. Next, Ryland leveraged his company's position in the green energy sector. Northstar Solutions had recently been approached about providing heating systems for several government buildings, contracts that Thad Norwood had quietly helped arrange in expectation of future control through Audrina. Ryland called a board meeting and announced a strategic pivot. Effective immediately, we're withdrawing from all government contract considerations and focusing exclusively on private sector innovations, he informed his surprised executives. Furthermore, I'm initiating a complete security overhaul of our proprietary technology. No specifications leave this building without my personal authorization. This move effectively cut off the access the Wheelers had been counting on. Ryland followed it by filing patents on several innovations he had previously delayed registering. Innovations that Montgomery Wheeler had specifically mentioned in emails as technology they hoped to control through Audrina. 10 days after Ryland's disappearance, the pressure on Audrina and Thad had intensified significantly. Leanne Kovac published the first in what would become a series of articles examining Thad Norwood's campaign financing, raising questions about his connections to development projects that had received unusual expediting through regulatory processes. The environmental concerns about Wheeler Point had reached the state's Department of Natural Resources, triggering a hold on further development pending a new, independent environmental assessment. Several investors had already pulled out, citing concerns about potential litigation. Ryland monitored their reactions through the surveillance equipment. The once confident couple now spent their time frantically trying to contain the damage, their relationship showing increasing signs of strain under pressure. "Your father promised this wouldn't happen," Thad shouted during one particularly heated argument. "He said the environmental approvals were locked down." "Don't blame my father," Audrina fired back. "He's losing millions every day this project is delayed. This has to be Ryland's doing, but I don't understand how he could possibly know about any of this." "Well, he obviously does. First the recordings, now this. What else does he know? What else is he planning?" Thad paced the room, his political mask completely dropped to reveal the panicked man beneath. "I'm getting calls from donors questioning my judgment after that newspaper article. The party leadership is concerned." As Ryland watched their relationship fracture under pressure, he implemented the next phase of his plan, direct confrontation. He sent a text message to Audrina from a new number. "Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m., North Star headquarters. Come alone if you want to resolve this quietly." Within minutes, his surveillance showed Audrina calling both her father and Thad in rapid succession. They debated strategies, clearly uncertain about the extent of Ryland's knowledge and capabilities. "We need to know what he wants," Montgomery insisted over speakerphone. "Audrina, you'll meet him. Offer whatever is necessary to contain this situation." "I don't think that's wise," Thad objected. "What if it's a trap? What if he has recording devices?" "Of course he'll have recording devices," Montgomery snapped. "The question is, what does he want? Money? The divorce on his terms? We need to know before this gets any worse." Audrina looked genuinely frightened for the first time. "What if he knows about everything, Daddy? The contracts, the campaign financing, all of it." "Impossible," Montgomery insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "Just meet him. Find out what he knows and what he wants. We can handle Ryland Mercer." As the call ended, Ryland smiled coldly at the monitor. "No," he said to the empty hotel room. "You really can't." He spent the remainder of the evening finalizing preparations for the meeting, a confrontation that would push his revenge into its most decisive phase. The Wheeler family and Thad Norwood had believed they were dealing with a simple man they could easily manipulate and discard. Tomorrow, they would begin to understand just how profound their miscalculation had been. Chapter 6: Strategic Maneuvers. The conference room at North Star Solutions headquarters offered a panoramic view of Minneapolis, the winter sun casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. Ryland sat at the head of the table, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, reviewing documents as he waited. Security cameras showed Audrina arriving in the lobby, alone as instructed but visibly nervous. When she entered the conference room, Ryland noted how different she looked from the confident socialite who had laughed at him through frosted glass 10 days earlier. Her designer outfit couldn't hide the tension in her shoulders or the shadows under her expertly made-up eyes. "Where have you been?" she demanded immediately. "Do you have any idea what you've put me through?" "My father is." "Sit down, Audrina," Ryland interrupted calmly, not bothering to stand. "Your father's concerns are the least of your worries right now." Something in his tone silenced her. She slowly took a seat across from him, placing her Hermes handbag on the table like a shield. "I assume you've noticed certain difficulties arising for your family and Thad recently," Ryland began, his voice measured. "The newspaper articles, the environmental review, the investor concerns." Audrina's eyes widened. "That was you. How could you possibly?" "I know everything," Ryland cut her off again. "The affair with Thad. Your father's plans to ship me to Colorado while maintaining control of my company's technology. The campaign finance arrangements. The falsified environmental studies. Everything." He slid a folder across the table. "These are divorce papers. My terms are simple. You relinquish all claims to Northstar Solutions and my personal assets. In exchange, I don't release evidence of your father's environmental fraud to federal authorities or the documentation of illegal campaign contributions to the Federal Election Commission. Audrina flipped through the papers, her hands trembling slightly. This is blackmail. No, Ryland corrected her. This is consequence. You, your family, and your lover tried to destroy me, personally and professionally. You locked me out in a potentially lethal blizzard and laughed while telling me to freeze to death. His voice remained eerily calm. These are remarkably generous terms considering the circumstances. I need time to think, Audrina stalled. To consult with. You have 24 hours, Ryland stated flatly. After that, I release everything I have to the appropriate authorities and media outlets. He stood, indicating the meeting was over. And Audrina, I know you're recording this conversation for your father and Thad. Tell them I have substantial dead man switches in place. If anything happens to me, everything goes public automatically. After Audrina left, visibly shaken, Ryland received a call from Travis. They're meeting at Montgomery Wheeler's office, Travis reported. All of them, Audrina, Montgomery, Evelyn, Thad, and Senator Norwood just arrived. Perfect, Ryland replied. Activate the next phase. While the Wheeler-Norwood Alliance held their emergency meeting, Ryland's carefully laid groundwork continued to bear fruit. Devin Aronowitz filed a formal complaint with the EPA regarding Wheeler Point, attaching documentation suggesting willful misrepresentation of protected wetlands. Simultaneously, an anonymous tip to the State Election Commission raised questions about the relationship between Wheeler development approvals and Thad Norwood's campaign financing. But Ryland's masterstroke came in the form of a video compilation he had prepared and sent to key members of both families' social and business circles. The video contained carefully edited selections from the surveillance footage, showing Audrina and Thad discussing their plans to manipulate Ryland, interspersed with clips of Montgomery Wheeler outlining how they would maintain control of Northstar's technology. The compilation ended with the damning footage from the night of the snowstorm, clearly showing Audrina, Thad, and the Wheelers laughing as they watched Ryland potentially freezing to death. The video was strategically sent to people who would be most disturbed by its contents: major donors to Thad's campaign, business partners of Montgomery Wheeler who valued ethical conduct, and social connections who prided themselves on moral standards. Within hours, phones throughout Minneapolis elite circles were ringing as the content was discussed, shared, and condemned. By evening, Ryland's surveillance of the Wheeler home captured the chaos his actions had unleashed. Montgomery paced the living room, his face flushed with anger as he shouted into his phone. I don't care what your concerns are, Johnson. We've done business for 20 years. What? Who showed you? That's completely out of context. Hello? Hello? He stared at his phone. He hung up on me. Arthur Johnson just pulled out of the downtown project. Evelyn Wheeler sat rigidly on the sofa, her social mask crumbling as she made call after call to friends who suddenly weren't available to speak with her. Thad and Audrina argued in heated whispers in the corner. My campaign manager says 3 major donors have withdrawn their support, Thad hissed. The party leadership is calling for a meeting tomorrow. This could end my career before it really begins. What about my reputation? Audrina shot back. I'm getting texts from people I've known my entire life asking if I really watched my husband freezing and laughed about it. Senator Norwood, who had remained silent through much of the chaos, finally spoke. We need to contain this immediately. Montgomery, what exactly does Ryland want? Montgomery explained the divorce terms. He's trying to back us into a corner. If Audrina signs those papers, she loses any claim to Northstar's technology, the very innovation we've been positioning ourselves to control. And if she doesn't sign? Senator Norwood asked pointedly. He claims he'll release evidence of campaign finance violations and environmental fraud to the authorities, Montgomery admitted reluctantly. The senator's face hardened. Then she signs. Today, he turned to his son. Thad, you need to distance yourself from this situation immediately. Issue a statement expressing shock at these false allegations and emphasize your commitment to ethical governance. But Dad, Thad began to protest. No arguments. The senator cut him off. Your political future is salvageable if we act quickly. This relationship, he gestured between Thad and Audrina, is now a liability. The cruel calculation in the senator's voice, the immediate sacrifice of Audrina to protect his son's career, was exactly what Rylan had anticipated. He watched the monitor as realization dawned on Audrina's face. She was being abandoned by the very people for whom she had betrayed her husband. "You're throwing me under the bus?" she asked incredulously. "After everything I've done for Thad's career? After using my connections, my family's influence?" Thad wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's not personal, Audrina. It's politics." "Not personal," she repeated, her voice rising. "We've been sleeping together for 8 months. We talked about a future together once I divorced Rylan." "Plans change," Senator Norwood interjected coldly. "Montgomery, I suggest you advise your daughter to sign those divorce papers immediately. Contain the damage. We can revisit our business arrangements once this blows over." As the alliance that had conspired against him fractured under pressure, Rylan made his final preparations for the endgame. The next 24 hours would determine whether the Wheelers and Norwoods surrendered to his terms or escalated to all-out war. Either way, Rylan was prepared. He picked up his phone and sent a text to Travis. "Proceed with contingency plan Delta. They're starting to break." Travis's response came moments later, already in motion. "The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. if needed." Rylan set his phone down and gazed out at the Minneapolis skyline. The individuals who had laughed at his potential death were now experiencing a different kind of freezing out, social, financial, and political isolation that threatened everything they valued. It was poetic justice of the coldest kind. Chapter 7. Pressure Points. The next morning dawned clear and brutally cold, temperatures plunging to record lows across Minneapolis. Inside his hotel suite, Rylan reviewed the latest developments on his multiple monitors. Overnight, 3 more investors had withdrawn from Wheeler development projects, citing ethical concerns. Thad Norwood had canceled 2 scheduled campaign appearances, his staff citing a family emergency. Most significantly, Senator Norwood had been photographed entering the offices of his longtime legal counsel, his expression grim and distracted. "They're scrambling," Travis observed, bringing Rylan a fresh coffee. "The question is whether they'll capitulate or counterattack." "They'll try both," Rylan predicted, accepting the coffee. "The Wheelers are too proud to surrender completely, and they have too much to lose. We need to be prepared for whatever desperate moves they attempt." His assessment proved accurate when his attorney, Simone Patterson, called mid-morning. "Montgomery Wheeler just contacted me," she reported. "He's offering a counterproposal. Audrina will sign the divorce papers with your terms regarding Northstar Solutions. But in exchange, you must sign NDAs regarding their personal conduct and business practices and agree to cease all current actions against them." Rylan considered this briefly. "Tell him the offer is rejected. The original terms stand, with one addition. I want written apologies from everyone present the night I was locked out. Detailed admissions of what they did, signed, and notarized." "They'll never agree to that," Simone warned. "Written admissions could be used against them later, regardless of any NDA." "Exactly," Rylan replied calmly. "That's the point. The apologies are non-negotiable." While Rylan's professional team continued applying legal pressure, Malcolm Broderick implemented the next phase of digital warfare. Using the access he had established to the Wheelers and Norwoods communications, he deployed a sophisticated program that intercepted and delayed their emails and text messages, creating communication gaps that heightened their paranoia and confusion. Montgomery would send urgent messages to his business partners that wouldn't arrive for hours. Thad's campaign team received contradictory instructions, causing further disarray. Senator Norwood found himself unable to reach key political allies at crucial moments. The surveillance feeds captured their mounting frustration. In one particularly revealing moment, Montgomery Wheeler slammed his phone down after another failed call attempt. "It's like he's everywhere at once," he muttered to his wife. "Our communications are compromised, our business partners are abandoning us, and the banking consortium just put the Lakeside Project review on indefinite hold." Evelyn Wheeler's carefully maintained composure had finally cracked. "This is your fault," she hissed at her husband. "You pushed too hard with that Colorado scheme. We should have just let Audrina divorce him normally instead of trying to control his company." "Don't lecture me about business decisions," Montgomery snapped back. "This was supposed to be a simple acquisition strategy. Audrina marries the man with the technology we want. Then we ease him out, while maintaining control through her. It's worked dozens of times before with other companies. Well, it's not working now, Evelyn retorted. Our society connections are evaporating. Carolina Winthrop just uninvited me from the hospital board gala. Uninvited Montgomery. After 15 years on that board. Throughout the day, Rylan monitored these fractures with clinical detachment. The surveillance of Thad's apartment yielded perhaps the most satisfying development, a heated confrontation between Thad and Audrina. My father says I need to issue a statement claiming our relationship began only recently, after you were already separated from Rylan, Thad explained, not meeting Audrina's eyes. Her expression shifted from disbelief to fury. That's a lie. We've been together for months, while I was very much married. You told me you loved me, that we would be together once Rylan was out of the picture. Thad straightened his tie nervously. It's just optics, Audrina. My political career. Your political career? She interrupted incredulously. What about my life? My reputation? I'm losing everything because of this. You should have thought about that before locking your husband out in a blizzard, Thad replied coldly. That video makes you look like a monster, Audrina. I need to distance myself from that image. Their argument escalated until Audrina stormed out, tears streaming down her face. She drove directly to her parents' home, where more hard truths awaited her. Montgomery Wheeler sat her down in his study, his expression severe. You need to sign the divorce papers, he stated flatly. Today, we can't afford any more damage. What about Northstar Solutions? Audrina protested. The technology patents? Everything we've been working toward. Montgomery's laugh was bitter. That's gone, Audrina. Rylan has outmaneuvered us completely. We're fighting for survival now, for the existing Wheeler developments, for Thad's political future, for our standing in this community. Sign the papers, contain the damage, and we'll rebuild from there. At 4 p.m., precisely 6 hours before Rylan's deadline expired, Simone Patterson called to inform him that Audrina had signed the divorce papers according to his terms. However, the Wheeler family in Norwoods had refused to provide the written apologies. They said that demand was vindictive and unnecessary, Simone reported. Then we proceed to the press conference, Rylan decided immediately. No compromises. The press conference had been Rylan's contingency plan, a nuclear option that would publicly expose the entire conspiracy. Travis had arranged for Leanne Kovac and journalists from 3 major news outlets to attend, with video evidence prepared and ready to distribute. Rylan's phone rang almost immediately after he ended the call with Simone. Montgomery Wheeler's name flashed on the screen. Mercer, Rylan answered coolly. This has gone far enough. Montgomery's voice had lost its usual authoritative tone. You have your divorce on your terms. Isn't that sufficient? You tried to steal my company, destroy my marriage, and laughed while leaving me to potentially die of exposure, Rylan replied evenly. So no, it's not sufficient. Written apologies, as specified, or I proceed with full disclosure at 6 p.m. today. A long pause followed. The apologies would never be made public. They would remain private unless any of you ever move against me again, Rylan confirmed. Consider them insurance. Another pause. We'll have them delivered within the hour. True to his word, a courier arrived at Rylan's hotel 40 minutes later with an envelope containing 5 letters from Montgomery, Evelyn, Audrina, Thad, and Senator Norwood. Each detailed their role in the conspiracy and the incident at the lake house, admitting to actions that ranged from unethical to potentially criminal. Rylan read each carefully, then placed them in his safe. The press conference was canceled, but Rylan maintained one final leverage point. He called Leanne Kovac directly. The exclusive interview we discussed is still on for tomorrow, he confirmed. But the focus has changed. I want to discuss innovation protection for small technology companies against predatory acquisition strategies. No direct mentions of specific individuals, but the message will be clear to those who need to hear it. That evening, as Rylan prepared to leave the hotel and return to his own home for the first time in 2 weeks, he received an unexpected visitor. Security alerted him that Audrina was in the lobby, requesting to see him. After a moment's consideration, Rylan agreed to a brief meeting in the hotel's private dining room. Audrina looked diminished somehow. Her designer clothes and perfect makeup couldn't conceal the defeat in her posture and eyes. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly as she sat across from him. You've won. You have the divorce. You've kept your company. You've humiliated my entire family. Isn't that enough? Rylan studied her dispassionately. You still don't understand, do you? This was never about winning or revenge for its own sake. This was about justice and consequences. You and your family tried to destroy everything I've built because you saw me as beneath you, as disposable. We made a mistake, she admitted, tears forming in her eyes. A terrible mistake. I'm sorry, Rylan. Truly sorry. No, he corrected her gently. You're sorry you failed. You're sorry you lost. There's a difference. He stood up. The divorce will be finalized within the week. I suggest you use this experience to reconsider how you treat people in the future. Not everyone will be as merciful as I've been. Audrina looked up sharply. Merciful? You've destroyed my family's business, Thad's political career, our social standing. I've exposed the truth, Rylan interrupted. Nothing more. If the truth destroys you, that's not my responsibility. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Audrina? The temperature that night at the lake house dropped to -27 degrees. A person exposed to those conditions without proper clothing would have approximately 30 minutes before hypothermia set in. 20 minutes more before death. Remember that the next time you laugh at someone suffering. He walked out without looking back, leaving Audrina alone with the consequences of her actions. Chapter 8. Counteroffensive. The apparent capitulation of the Wheeler and Norwood families proved to be merely a tactical retreat. 3 days after the divorce papers were signed and the written apologies secured, Rylan discovered their true intentions when Travis burst into his office at Northstar Solutions. We've got a problem, Travis announced, placing his tablet on Rylan's desk. They're moving against you through back channels. The tablet displayed intercepted emails between Senator Norwood and several regulatory officials at the Department of Energy. The senator was leveraging his committee position to initiate a routine audit of companies receiving certain green energy tax credits, with Northstar Solutions specifically named as a primary target. Simultaneously, Montgomery Wheeler had contacted Rylan's largest clients, suggesting that Northstar's heating technology might have unreported safety concerns that would emerge during the upcoming government audit. They're trying to destroy my company's reputation and trigger a stock devaluation, Rylan observed calmly. Predictable, if unimaginative. There's more. Travis continued grimly. Thad Norwood has filed a police report alleging harassment and illegal surveillance. He hasn't named you specifically, but the implication is clear. Rylan leaned back in his chair, processing this information. They signed those apologies thinking it would end the matter, but now they're gambling that I won't release them even under attack. He smiled thinly. A miscalculation. His response was immediate and comprehensive. First, Rylan contacted Simone Patterson, forwarding copies of the intercepted communications. They violated the implicit terms of our agreement, he explained. Prepare to file harassment and defamation suits against Montgomery Wheeler and Senator Norwood personally, not their companies or offices. Make it clear these are individual actions that will require personal testimony. Next, Rylan reached out to Devin Aronowitz, who had successfully halted the Wheeler Point development. Montgomery Wheeler is making moves against my company, Rylan explained. I believe you'd find it valuable to examine the refinancing agreements on his Westlake commercial properties. The collateral valuations appear significantly inflated. Devin, who had already benefited substantially from Rylan's previous information, was eager to pursue this new avenue. Consider it done. My financial team will begin immediately. Finally, Rylan implemented the most decisive countermeasure. He contacted 3 members of the Congressional Ethics Committee who had received campaign donations from Senator Norwood over the years. Without explicitly mentioning the senator, Rylan provided documentation showing how certain committee members might be using regulatory agencies to target business competitors of their donors. I believe this represents a concerning pattern that the Ethics Committee would want to review, Rylan suggested carefully. I've prepared a comprehensive report with supporting evidence. The effect of these countermoves was rapid and devastating. By the following afternoon, Senator Norwood received notification of a preliminary ethics inquiry regarding potential abuse of his committee position. Montgomery Wheeler's refinancing applications were suddenly subject to enhanced due diligence reviews by previously cooperative banks. Most alarmingly for them, images from the surveillance video, showing Audrina and the others laughing as Rylan stood freezing outside, began circulating on social media, despite no direct action from Rylan himself. The panic this created was evident in the emergency meeting called at Senator Norwood's private residence. Rylan's surveillance, which Travis had maintained despite the increasing risk, captured their desperate discussion. He must have made copies of everything. The senator raged, pacing his study. The apologies, the videos, all of it. He's releasing it strategically even after our agreement. Montgomery Wheeler looked physically ill. 3 more investors pulled out this morning after those photos appeared online. The bank is questioning our collateral valuations on properties that were approved just last month. My congressional campaign is finished, Thad added despondently. The party chairman called personally to suggest I focus on serving out my current term effectively, rather than seeking higher office. Audrina, seated silently in the corner, finally spoke. I warned you not to counterattack. I told you he was different, that he wouldn't react like the others you've pushed around. But none of you listened. Don't lecture us now, her father snapped. This disaster began with your failure to properly manage your husband. Manage? Audrina laughed bitterly. You all treated him like he was some naive country bumpkin you could manipulate and discard. You never saw what I eventually realized too late. He's more intelligent and more strategic than any of you. And unlike you, he understands consequences. The senator silenced them both with a raised hand. Enough blame. We need solutions. Montgomery, withdraw your communications with Northstar's clients immediately. I'll suspend the regulatory inquiry. Thad, drop the police report. Complete disengagement is our only option now. And then what? Montgomery demanded. My company is bleeding value every day. Then we rebuild, the senator stated grimly. From a much weaker position than before, but with a valuable lesson learned. Some opponents can't be bulldozed. Some can't be bought. And apparently, Rylan Mercer can't be underestimated. As they implemented their retreat, Rylan monitored their actions carefully. True to their word, the regulatory inquiry was quietly shelved, the police report withdrawn, and Montgomery's whisper campaign against Northstar Solutions ceased. However, Rylan had one final move to make, one that would ensure they never contemplated moving against him again. He arranged a meeting with Leanne Kovac, the investigative journalist who had been instrumental in exposing Thad Norwood's questionable campaign financing. I have a new story that might interest you, Rylan told her, sliding a folder across the restaurant table. It concerns systematic attempts by certain wealthy families to acquire innovative technologies through strategic marriages and forced divorces. Leanne raised an eyebrow as she reviewed the documents. This is comprehensive. Names, dates, companies, at least 6 examples of the same pattern over the past decade. She looked up at him. The Wheeler family isn't explicitly named, but anyone familiar with the business community would recognize the parallels. I'm not asking you to accuse anyone specific, Rylan clarified. Just report on a troubling pattern in the technology acquisition space. A warning to other innovative companies, if you will. Leanne studied him carefully. This isn't just business for you, is it? Let's just say I have a personal interest in protecting innovators from predatory practices, Rylan replied smoothly. The article appeared 3 days later, sending shockwaves through Minneapolis business and technology communities. While carefully avoiding direct accusations, it detailed a pattern of behavior that perfectly matched the Wheeler family's tactics against Rylan and other entrepreneurs before him. The piece was picked up by national technology publications, prompting discussions about unethical acquisition strategies throughout the industry. For the Wheeler and Norwood families, this public exposure, coming after they had already retreated from their counteroffensive, was the final blow. Their social invitations dwindled further. Business partners insisted on enhanced transparency in all dealings. Political allies maintained polite but noticeable distance. Rylan observed their isolation with quiet satisfaction. He had not only protected himself and his company, but had effectively neutralized their ability to employ similar tactics against others in the future. The predators had become the prey, exposed and vulnerable in a way they had never anticipated. When Travis came to Rylan's office with reports that the Wheelers were selling their Lake Superior estate, the very property where Rylan had been locked out in the snowstorm, Rylan made a decision that surprised even himself. Buy it, he instructed his financial advisor. Through a shell company. Don't let them know who the purchaser is until after closing. The acquisition was completed within weeks, at a significantly reduced price given the Wheelers' increasingly desperate financial situation. Ryland took possession of the keys personally, walking alone through the grand house where he had once been treated as an unwelcome outsider. In the main hall, where the family had gathered and laughed at his potential death, Ryland made a call to a local contractor. "I'd like to donate this property for conversion into a winter shelter for the homeless," he explained. "With one condition, the name should be Second Chance Lodge, and there should be a plaque in the entrance hall that reads, 'No one deserves to freeze in the cold.'" As he ended the call, Ryland looked out through the same frosted glass panels where Audrina's laughing face had once appeared. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again, the start of another Minnesota winter. But this time, Ryland Mercer stood on the inside, warm and secure in the knowledge that justice, cold and precise, had been served. Chapter 9, 0 Degrees. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Minneapolis had transitioned from the bitter cold of winter to the pleasant warmth of summer. The transformation of the Wheeler Lake Estate into Second Chance Lodge was nearly complete, with the grand opening scheduled for the upcoming fall. Ryland had maintained his anonymity as the donor, but the conversion had received considerable positive media coverage, particularly in contrast to the continued decline of the Wheeler family's social and financial standing. On a bright June morning, Ryland sat in his expanded office at NorthStar Solutions, reviewing the latest quarterly reports. The company had not only survived the attempted takeover, but had thrived in its aftermath. With the Wheeler threat neutralized, Ryland had accelerated the development of several new technologies, securing additional patents and expanding into international markets. A knock at his door interrupted his work. His assistant entered, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Mr. Mercer, you have a visitor. Audrina Wheeler is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent about seeing you." Ryland considered this unexpected development. "Show her in," he decided after a moment. "And please stay by the phone. If I call out, contact security immediately." Audrina entered cautiously, a shadow of her former self. The designer clothes and perfect styling remained, but there was a subdued quality to her presence now, a dimming of the vibrant confidence she had once projected. "Thank you for seeing me," she began, remaining standing even after Ryland gestured to a chair. "I won't take much of your time." "What can I do for you, Ms. Wheeler?" Ryland asked, deliberately using her maiden name. She flinched slightly at the formality. "I wanted to tell you in person that I'm leaving Minneapolis, moving to Seattle to start over." She hesitated. "And I wanted to apologize again, properly this time. Not because I'm forced to or because of legal considerations, but because I truly regret what happened between us." Ryland studied her impassively. "Which part do you regret most? The affair? The attempt to steal my company? Or laughing while I potentially froze to death?" Audrina's composure cracked slightly. "All of it. I was a different person then, entitled, selfish, completely blind to the consequences of my actions." She took a deep breath. "What you did to us, to my family, to Thad, it was brutal but fair. You showed us exactly who we were, and it wasn't pretty." "And Thad?" Ryland inquired neutrally. "How is the former rising political star?" "We haven't spoken in months," Audrina admitted. "His father arranged a position for him with a think tank in Washington, far from the public spotlight. Our relationship ended the moment it became a liability rather than an asset." Ryland nodded, unsurprised. "And your parents?" "Downsizing significantly. Dad's company has lost most of its major investors. They're selling the Minneapolis house and moving to Arizona." She attempted a weak smile. "Turns out they don't do well without their social status and connections." "And now you're starting fresh in Seattle," Ryland observed. "Convenient." Audrina's eyes flashed with a hint of her old spirit. "It's not an escape, Ryland. It's acceptance. I've lost everything that I once valued, my marriage, my family standing, my social position. But in losing all that, I've gained something else, perspective." She placed an envelope on his desk. "I won't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to have this." Ryland didn't touch the envelope. "What is it?" "The deed to a small property my grandmother left me. It's the only asset I have that wasn't part of our divorce settlement or tied to my family's finances." She stepped back toward the door. "I've donated it to the Second Chance Lodge project. Anonymously, of course, but I wanted you to know." Ryland's expression betrayed nothing. though he was genuinely surprised. "How did you know I was behind that project?" Audrina smiled sadly. "Because I know you now, Rylan. Not the way I should have known my husband, but the way one comes to know an adversary who has thoroughly defeated them. The shelter, the plaque message, it had to be you." She turned to leave, then paused. "One last thing. Thad and my father, they wanted to keep fighting you, to find some way to strike back. I was the one who convinced them it was futile, that you would always be 3 steps ahead. Sometimes the only way to survive a blizzard is to acknowledge the cold and find shelter." She met his eyes directly. "Goodbye, Rylan." After she left, Rylan sat motionless for several minutes, processing this unexpected epilogue. He finally opened the envelope and verified that Audrina had indeed transferred a valuable lakefront property to the Second Chance Lodge project. An accompanying note explained that the property could be used to expand the shelter's services or sold to fund operations. Later that evening, Rylan drove to the construction site of the former Wheeler estate, now in the final stages of its transformation. Workers were installing energy-efficient heating systems, donated by North Star Solutions, that would ensure no one would ever feel the deadly cold within those walls again. As he walked through the nearly completed shelter, Rylan paused in the main hall, where he had once been locked out. The space had been reconfigured into a communal gathering area, with large tables and comfortable seating. The frosted glass panels remained, but the door now featured an emergency override system that prevented it from ever being locked from the inside. His phone rang, a call from Travis. Final reports on the Wheelers and Norwoods as requested, Travis informed him. Montgomery's company is selling off assets to cover debts. Senator Norwood's influence has waned significantly. He's announced he won't seek re-election. Thad's working at that think tank in D.C., completely out of the public eye. "And Audrina?" Rylan asked, though he already knew. "Flight to Seattle confirmed for tomorrow morning. One-way ticket." Rylan ended the call and stood in the fading light of the summer evening, contemplating the journey that had brought him here. The cold rage that had fueled his revenge had served its purpose, delivering precise and comprehensive justice to those who had wronged him. The Wheelers and Norwoods had learned the harsh lesson that actions have consequences, that treating people as disposable pieces in their games of power and privilege carried risks they had never imagined. As for Rylan himself, he had emerged stronger, his company secure, his innovative work protected and flourishing. The attempt to destroy him had instead revealed his true capabilities, a strategic mind and unbreakable resolve that had dismantled his adversaries. He walked to the entrance hall where the promised plaque would soon hang. "No one deserves to freeze in the cold." The words would serve as both a mission statement for the shelter and a subtle reminder of the events that had created it. Rylan Mercer had survived the coldest betrayal and emerged victorious, turning a moment of cruelty into a force for positive change, while ensuring those responsible faced the winter of their own making. As he left the building, he reflected that true revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about transformation, about reshaping the world to ensure such injustice could never happen again. The temperature outside was warm, but deep within Rylan, a certain coldness remained, not the desperate chill of that snowstorm night, but the absolute zero of a man who had learned exactly how far he would go to obtain justice, and who would never again allow himself to be vulnerable to those who mistook kindness for weakness. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.